and I'm just going to walk through them. If you see one you like, just let me know what number. I'll try to keep numbering as I go if I can not forget what number I'm up to. And that way you can tell me which one you'd like to learn. And that'll, if I get a lot of requests for a certain number, I'll do that as the next video. So this first card, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Fabriano Italian paper. And so I tend to buy the note card size and the square cards a lot. Very nice paper, and it just gives you a nice deckled edge and everything. And then I kind of just customize it to what I like. This one just has a theme of learning. Second one is, I was so proud of this technique, and you'll see a couple of cards with this technique. There was a challenge where you had to put a hexagon in the card, and I had no hexagons of any kind. But I had an embossing folder, so I used the embossing folder to create the hexagrams without embossing, just using it as a stamp. And I was so proud because I had invented something. I had never seen it before, and I came up with this idea, and I was so proud of it. So you'll see one of my videos explains how to do it, to the story behind the card, and it says creativity takes courage. So it takes courage to kind of try something new and different, give it a shot, and then share it with the world. All of that takes courage, but it's part of creativity. This card, just tell you a little about this card. This card is in the July issue of Cards magazine. I like to do different languages every now and then just because the world's not just completely English. This little card, this is a penny black stamp. It's actually a winter stamp, but I turned it into a summer stamp just by stamping in green to give it a nice spring color feel. And then I put little blue sprinkles on it to create a sparkling effect. So this could easily be some kind of plant that's blooming blue flowers, but my imagination can go crazy sometime. Still going on these small note cards. This one is just one of those ones I wanted to make it kind of funny and comical. But it says, God would not have made me this creative if he wanted me to cook and clean. So I guess this was one of those days when I was being lazy and I wanted to have an excuse. I'm so creative, I shouldn't cook and clean. So I love that. It's just, I used the little tiny clear block, put ink on it and water, and made these little 4 backgrounds, and then stamped images of cleaning products. And this is a really cool design. Let's suppose you're having a class and you want to teach some people who have never stamped before. They don't, what is stamping? And you just want to convince them that it's fun. Take designer series paper, all of it. Just pull out your scraps, pull out everything you have, bring it to the class along with some basic card bases already cut and folded for them, and then bring a bunch of sentiment stamps. And now tell them to cut the paper. This is approximately, if I use my grid here, 2.5 inches wide for the note cards. And you would probably want to go 3.5 inches wide, or at least 3 inches wide for a standard card. And just have them cut the strips of paper they like, put it on the paper, and then on the lower right hand side of the paper, just stamp a sentiment. Any sentiment they like. And believe me, you'll be surprised how many variations they come out with, So this is 8. Number 9. I got really crazy with these By the Sea, I think it is, stamp set. I really love those little birds. I just thought they looked hand sketched, and so you'll see I have a few of these of different orientations and sizes. But this I just masked with tape, and then I sponged different colors down so that it would look like sky, water, and then sand. And then with my white gel pen, I just kind of scribbled in and smudged it with the Huggies to make the frostiness of the waves. And then I used Our Daily Bread stamp for the sentiment. The hope we have is an anchor for the soul. sure and steadfast. And that's from Hebrews 6:19. Now, sometimes I like to be extremely artsy, right? I'm a person who likes to play in the craft room. So here I took a piece of cardstock and cut it down to a size I thought would be good in a tall note card like this. And then I covered it with stickles, blue, green, a little bit of tan and yellow. And I made myself a little panel. This panel was actually inspired by a piece of wall art. So the wall art was tall like this and it looked similar. And I just recreated it using stickles and cardstock, and then I added a little funky sentiment because I thought the whole thing was kind of funky. This is one of our new stamp sets from the Stampin' Up! Catalog. Oh my goodness. I can't remember the name right now, but I'll put it up on the screen when I put the video on. And I heat embossed it and filled it in with the blender pens. Very soft look, but I love that look. And I loved it so much that I decided not to interfere with it. So I decided to mount the whole focal piece on a piece of watercolor card to make it extremely clean and simple and just focus on that. Here is, this is designer series paper. This was the watercolor paper that I just basically cut into squares and then stamped on it with a watercolor technique. This is a very old Stampin' Up! Stamp that's retired, but I've always been in love with it, so I still use it very often. And again, I use the scripture Galatians 6:8 in this case. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. This one is all black, and it's inside, it's got the white liner with the gray image, same image on the front that's white. This was done with white paint. So that's that. Here is that same, you saw it in a few other cards earlier, but this time if I use tans and blues, it gave it a much softer look. And I used Deuteronomy 6:3 on that one. I love this particular stamp set because you can play with shading, and with blender pens, I like to play with shading with blender pens. I know a lot of people enjoy doing it with Copic markers. I do that too, but I really enjoy the blender pens. I don't know, because they're soft. I like to do them better. And I like the little stickles too. This next card is using a die cut and then using the die cut to emboss and then matting that and just putting a vertical stamp on the side. Really easy. This was at Watercolor Designer Series paper again. I cut it to the full size of the card almost. You can only barely see the yellow card. And then I added some die cuts in 2 shades of green. And then I added, again, the creativity takes courage. Someone's going to ask me where that stamp comes from, and I'll try to find out. This black stamp, I'm treating it like you would do when you do like art journaling, where you gesso first and then you stamp. And I just said gracias on this one. Here, where I just used an embossing folder, and then I stamped text on the card, darkened it, kind of aged it, and then added the butterfly. And that turned out nice. I think it says, "You are the friend everybody wishes they had." Here's that same die cut that I did in copper, but this time I did it on paper that I had inked with Copic markers. And then this is a Stampin' Up! Background stamp that I just die cut an oval out of the middle of, and then I added black. I wanted that contrast. And then this one messed up, so it warped on me. But I had just done a die cut on a blue sky and put welcome, and I probably need to throw this out. But it was here because I want to remember to do it over. This one, I just stamped the image in like a brown ink, and then I used the white gel pen to fill in certain areas. Love the contrast. This one, I used a very old Stampin' Up! Stamp that I think is still available actually. I stamped it in blue, then I stamped it in white and white embossed it. Added a few pearls and hand wrote the word prayer down there on the bottom. Kind of cool. This was another card for the virtual stamping night. Again, I think the subject was camping, and so these are stickers, and it turned out really nice. The background I made with a clear block. I took the clear block, I put green ink on the bottom, blue ink on the top, wet it down, and stamped. And there you go. Here you go. This is another copper card, similar to the one I did a little earlier that I showed you a little earlier, but I hammered it. So I'm laughing because I didn't have a hammer. I took the stylus and kind of just kind of banged into the copper with my stylus to get the effect of hammered steel or hammered copper. This one is, now this is a square one that didn't work. It turned out pretty well. I'm not sure why that other one worked, so I don't know. And then you can see that I watercolored that flower stamp that I love. And I used a watercolor brush just to give a background. This is an old stamp that I have too. I think this is an old Stampin' Up! Stamp, these little blue flowers. I just felt like being kind of weird. Who has blue flowers like that? But I loved it. This is a London kind of a background stamp that I really went crazy on with markers and then wetting it down and then stamping it to get a really, handmade, even artsy kind of a watercolor look. This was a technique where you ink the embossing folder before you emboss. Very easy, kind of a vintage look. This was a stamp set we had in Celebration a couple of years back that I still use pretty often, but I love to marker it and stamp it with water. It has a really nice watercolor effect to it. This is a stamp from that same exact stamp set, and you can see that I've marked it differently before I wet it to give a really handmade watercolor effect. This is a little card that I did just by trying to use dies and embossing. It was a, like a baptism card, because that's a church on the front. And if you take the band, it opens. This one is in plastic, so I hope you can see it. But I love the sentiment on this one. If you look at the world, you'll be distressed. If you look within, you'll be depressed. If you look at God, you'll be at rest. And so that's a quote. And I did that with Spellbinders. Now, I am pretty much a really big Spellbinders fan. I'll show you a couple of other Spellbinder cards that I did. There's some paper toiling on this one, too. So that's Spellbinder. This is Spellbinder frame, but I think this is Impression Obsession, the die in here, which is actually cut from a toilet tissue roll. This one is, oh boy, Karen, I forgot her name anyway. But she does like a bunch of inchy stamps. I'll try to put that in the video. Spellbinders. This is a little round card I made with the Spellbinder dies. And inside is that stamp we were just talking about. You can see how different it looks depending on how you marker it. This is one that I just recently did. I think I did this one for Amber. I haven't mailed it out yet. This one I did for one of the challenges. These are two guys with cars. And inside I did the inside. Sometimes I do the inside, sometimes I don't. Usually with the Spellbinders though, I will do the inside because they're so ornate. It's kind of like rude not to do the inside with the Spellbinder cards. Because people would expect it. And this one is one with paper towel. So those are all Spellbinder cards. I really love those. I just got a few left and we're done. Take an embossing folder, emboss, mount it, and add some vellum that you stamped on. Instant card, like 30 seconds. I'll try and do a video. You guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.